Do you know the feeling of being sentenced during a family meal? My sister toasted to triplets, then demanded I buy her a bigger house. The room laughed, treating my money like air. I did not cry. I just placed one envelope on the table, just as they thought I would fold. The house they were sitting in began changing owners right on the tablecloth. I was not a sister anymore. I was a landlord serving notice. My name is Aurora Collins. I am 32 years old, and in my line of work at Larkspire Advisory, we have a term for what was happening at that dining table. A catastrophic system failure. I analyze financial risk for a living. I spend my days staring at 3 distinct monitors in my home office, calculating the probability of ruin for mid-sized corporations that leverage too much debt against volatile assets. I can spot a sinking ship from a quarterly report, and I can smell a bankruptcy before the ink is dry on the loan application. But it turns out, you do not need a degree in quantitative analysis to see the crash coming when your own family treats your bank account like a public utility. The air in the house was thick enough to choke on, a suffocating blend of roasted turkey, sage stuffing, and the cloying, performative perfume my sister Delaney always wore when she wanted something. We were in the dining room of the house in the suburbs of Raleigh, North Carolina. It was a nice house, a colonial revival with white siding and black shutters, sitting on a quarter-acre lot that had appreciated 18% in the last 2 years. I knew the value precisely. I knew the property tax rate. I knew the exact cost of the new HVAC unit installed 3 months ago because the invoice was still sitting in my inbox, paid in full, this year. Thanksgiving was crowded. It was not just the core 4, my mother Marjorie, my father Frank, Delaney, and me. There was an audience. My mother had invited the neighbors, the Millers, along with half the church choir and a few of Delaney's high school friends who had never really left our hometown. The table had been extended with 2 card tables covered in mismatched tablecloths to accommodate 20 people. It felt less like a holiday dinner and more like a press conference. I sat near the end of the table, wedged between Aunt Celeste and a man named Gary, who I think was a deacon at my parents' church. Aunt Celeste was my father's older sister, a woman who wore sharp blazers and drank her iced tea without sugar. She spoke rarely, but her eyes moved constantly, tracking the micro-expressions across the room like a surveillance camera. She was the only person in this family who looked at me and saw a person, not a resource. "Aurora," Gary said, leaning in too close. "Your mother tells me you work with computers. That must be nice, sitting in your pajamas all day." I sliced my turkey with surgical precision. "I work in risk management, Gary, and I usually wear a suit." "Well, it must be nice to have all that free time," he chuckled, dismissing my career with a wave of his fork. I did not correct him. There was no point. In this house, my career was viewed as a mysterious hobby that inexplicably generated large sums of money, which were then expected to trickle down to the real people in the family who had real problems. The chatter at the table was loud, a chaotic symphony of silverware clinking and exaggerated laughter, but the energy shifted when Delaney stood up. My sister has always known how to command a room. At 29, she still carried herself with the frantic, demanding energy of a beauty pageant contestant afraid of losing her crown. She tapped her spoon against her wine glass. Cling, cling, cling. The room fell silent. My mother, Marjorie, clasped her hands under her chin, her eyes already wet with tears she had prepared in advance. My father, Frank, stopped chewing and looked at Delaney with a nod that seemed rehearsed, as if they had gone over the script regarding exactly when to look proud. Ethan, Delaney's fiancé, sat next to her. He looked pale. He was staring at his plate of mashed potatoes as if he hoped they would swallow him whole. Ethan was a decent man, soft-spoken and hard-working, but he had the shell-shocked look of someone who had realized too late that he had married into a cult. "Thank you all for coming," Delaney announced, her voice pitching up an octave to her announcement voice. She smoothed her hands over her stomach, which was currently flat under her silk dress. "Ethan and I have been keeping a little secret," the church ladies gasped on cue. "We went to the doctor last week. Delaney continued, beaming. And we aren't just having a baby. We are having 3. The room detonated. Screams of delight. Applause. My mother stood up and hugged my father. Triplets. Frank, did you hear? Triplets. 3 blessings, someone shouted from the other end of the table. I took a sip of my water. Triplets. 3 children. In this economy, that was a financial crisis wrapped in a swaddle. I looked at Ethan. He was trying to smile, but it looked more like a grimace of pain. Delaney basked in the applause for exactly 10 seconds before her eyes locked onto me. The warmth vanished from her face, replaced by that familiar, steely expectation. The room quieted down. Sensing the shift, this was the second act, the part where the bill arrives. And, Delaney said, her voice ringing out clearly over the cooling gravy, because we are going to be a family of 5, plus Mom and Dad helping out. This house is obviously going to be too small. We are going to need more space. She paused for dramatic effect. So, Aurora is going to buy me a bigger house. She said it as a statement of fact, not a question, not a request, a decree. My mother clapped her hands together, a sharp, violent sound in the sudden silence. Oh, Aurora, isn't that wonderful? You can finally put all that money to good use. Family is what matters most. It's the right thing to do, my father added, his voice gravelly. He didn't look at me. He rarely looked at me when he was complicit in my exploitation. Your sister needs the support. You're the one with the excess. The guests turned their heads toward me. 20 pairs of eyes. Some judged, some envied. But they all expected. I was the ATM that breathed. I was the designated payer. Delaney reached into her purse and pulled out a heavy ring of keys. She walked down the length of the table, her heels clicking on the hardwood floors I had paid to have refinished 6 months ago, and dropped the keys onto the tablecloth next to my plate. They hit with a heavy metallic clatter. I made a list, Delaney said, looking down at me with a benevolence that made my stomach turn. Start looking this week. I need 4 bedrooms minimum, a fenced yard for the kids, preferably in Oakwood or North Hills. I know you are busy with your little computer things, but try to prioritize this. We need to be settled before the 2nd trimester. I looked at the keys. I looked at Delaney. Then I looked at my mother, who was nodding encouragingly, as if buying a $500,000 property for a sibling was as standard as passing the salt. For 32 years, I had played my part, the quiet one, the reliable one, the one who fixed things. When Delaney crashed her car at 19, I paid the deductible. When my father's pension fund took a hit, I covered the difference. I had been trained to shrink so Delaney could expand. But risk analysis is about identifying the tipping point, the point where the cost of maintenance exceeds the value of the asset. I felt a strange coolness wash over me. My heart rate didn't spike. My hands didn't shake. It was the calm of the executioner. I picked up my napkin and dabbed the corners of my mouth. I looked up at Delaney and smiled. It was a polite smile, the kind you give a stranger in an elevator. Congratulations, Delaney, I said. My voice was steady, cutting through the murmurs of the room. Triplets, that is truly life-changing news. Delaney's smile widened. She thought she had won. She thought the check was already signed. I knew you'd be excited. We can go look at listings on Saturday. I saw a place on Fairview Road that is perfect. It is listed for $600,000. But I am sure you can negotiate. I took a sip of wine. Actually, I said, I have already found a house. Delaney blinked. You did? When? Oh my God. You knew I was pregnant? Did Mom tell you? She spun toward the guests. Look, she's already 1 step ahead. That is my big sister. It is a beautiful house, I continued, ignoring her performance. 3 bedrooms, a home office. Quiet neighborhood, very far from here. Delaney frowned slightly. 3 bedrooms? I said 4, but, well, maybe if the basement is finished. We can make it work. Where is it? I set my wine glass down, to understand why I placed those documents on the table at Thanksgiving. You have to understand that I was not born a landlord. I was trained to be one. I was raised in a curriculum of diminution, in the architecture of the Collins family. My sister Delaney was the load-bearing wall, the vaulted ceiling, and the grand entrance. I was the insulation. I was the drywall. I was the thing you installed to keep the structure standing. But you never thanked the drywall for holding the paint. You only noticed it when it cracked. I remember my 10th birthday with a clarity that still stings like a paper cut soaked in lemon juice. Delaney and I are not twins. She is 3 years younger than me. But somewhere along the line, my mother decided that separate celebrations were inefficient and that Delaney's fragility could not handle a day where she was not the protagonist. So my birthdays became our birthdays, that year. The party was in the backyard. The grass was freshly cut, smelling of gasoline and summer heat. My mother had invited all of Delaney's friends from the 2nd grade and a handful of my friends from the 5th. I remember wearing a dress I hated, something scratchy and floral that my mother insisted was cheerful. Delaney wore a princess costume, complete with a plastic tiara that she refused to take off even when we ate pizza. The climax of the afternoon was the cake. It was a massive sheet cake from the local bakery, covered in bright pink frosting rosettes. My mother carried it out to the picnic table, shielding the candles from the wind with her cupped hand. Everyone sang. I sang too, moving my lips out of habit, waiting for the moment I could blow out the candles. When the song ended, I leaned in, but Delaney, faster and louder, blew a gust of air that sprayed spit across the icing and extinguished every single flame. The adults laughed. They thought it was adorable. Look at her spirit, they said. She is just so full of life. I looked down at the writing on the cake, in darker pink piping gel. It read, Happy Birthday, Delaney. There was no, and Aurora. There was no ampersand. Just Delaney. I looked at my mother. I tugged on the hem of her apron. Mom, I whispered, so the guests would not hear. My name isn't on the cake. My mother did not kneel down to my level. She did not hug me. She looked at me with a tightness in her jaw. The look she saved for when I was being difficult. Oh, Aurora. Don't start, she hissed. The bakery charged per letter. We all know it is your birthday too. Don't be so sensitive. You are 10 years old. You are the big sister. Act like it. Don't be so sensitive. That was the first commandment of our house. But it is my birthday too, I said, my voice trembling. Do you want to make Delaney cry? My mother asked. It was a genuine question, posed as a moral test. If we make a fuss about a name on a cake, she will feel bad. She is little. You are big. You can handle knowing the truth without needing it spelled out in sugar. Be the bigger person. I learned then that the truth was something I had to hold alone, while everyone else got to eat the lie. I ate a piece of the cake that bore my sister's name. It tasted like wax and excessive sweetness. I smiled for the photos. I became the bigger person, which really meant I learned to occupy less space so Delaney could expand into mine. This dynamic did not vanish with childhood. It calcified. It hardened into a bone structure that shaped our entire adolescence. When I was 17, I won the state mathematics decathlon. It was a grueling 2-day event held in a university auditorium 3 hours away. I had spent months studying probability models and calculus, sitting at the kitchen table long after the rest of the house had gone to dark. I wanted to win, not just for the medal, but because logic made sense to me. In math, there was no emotional negotiation. 2 + 2 never equaled 5 just to keep the peace. I came home that Sunday evening, exhausted but vibrating with a frequency of pride I had never allowed myself to feel. I walked into the kitchen holding the trophy. It was heavy, gold-plated plastic on a marble base. My mother was at the stove, stirring a pot of chili. My father was reading the sports section. Delaney was sprawled on the couch, watching a reality show about people getting makeovers. I won, I said. I put the trophy on the counter. I got first place. I beat the kid from the magnet school in Charlotte. My father lowered his paper. That is great. Honey, real smart stuff. He smiled. a vague, distant expression that vanished as soon as he looked back at the baseball scores. My mother wiped her hands on a dish towel. She looked at the trophy, then she looked at me. There was a pause. I waited for the hug. I waited for the, "I am so proud of you." "That is wonderful, Aurora," she said. Then came the pivot. "Since you are doing so well with all this math stuff, you can help Delaney. She is failing algebra too." The air went out of my lungs. "Mom, I just won state. Can we just talk about that for a minute?" My mother sighed. The sound of a martyr being asked to carry one more stone. "I am talking about it. I am saying it is a blessing. God gave you these brains so you could help your family. Delaney is struggling. She is crying every night over her homework. If she doesn't pass, she won't get into a decent college. And then what? Do you want your sister to be left behind?" "It is not about her right now," I said. I felt the dangerous heat of rebellion rising in my neck. "I worked really hard for this," Delaney called out from the living room, her voice bored and airy. "Congratulations, nerd. Does this mean you will do my homework for me? Because seriously, Mr. Henderson is a nightmare." "I am not doing your homework," I snapped. "Frank," my mother said sharply, "speak to your daughter." My father folded his newspaper. He looked tired. He always looked tired when I asked to be seen. "Aurora," he said gentle, "don't cause a scene. Your sister is having a hard time. You know she is not as academic as you. It comes easy to you. Just help her out. Keep the peace." "It comes easy to you." That was the second lie. Nothing came easy. I worked until my eyes burned. I studied until I dreamt in equations. But because I did not complain, because I did not throw tantrums, they assumed it cost me nothing. Delaney had mastered the art of weaponized incompetence. She learned early that if she acted helpless, someone would pick up the slack, and that someone was always me. She would look at me with wide, wet eyes and say, "I just can't do it. Aurora, I am not strong like you. You are like a rock. You can handle anything." It sounded like a compliment. It was actually a shackle. By defining me as the strong one, she revoked my right to be weak, to be tired, or to be in need, if I was the rock. I was not allowed to bleed when they chipped away at me. There was a moment when I was 22, freshly graduated from college and working my first entry-level job as a junior analyst. I was living in a shoebox apartment, eating instant noodles to save money. Delaney was still in college, funded entirely by my parents, living in a sorority house that cost more per semester than my annual rent. I came home for Easter. The house was chaotic. Aunt Celeste was there, smoking a cigarette on the back porch, watching the rain hit the patio stones. Aunt Celeste was my father's sister, a woman who had never married and who wore her solitude like a tailored suit. She didn't speak much, but she saw everything. I was in the kitchen, washing the dishes from a lunch I hadn't even eaten because I had been busy setting the table. Delaney was in the living room showing my mother a new designer handbag she had needed for her internship interviews. "It was on sale, Mom," Delaney was saying. "And Aurora has a job now, so I thought maybe she could help me with the credit card bill. It is only $400. My mother's voice floated in. "We will ask her. She is doing well. She would want you to look professional." I gripped the edge of the sink so hard my knuckles turned white. The sponge in my hand dripped soapy water down my wrist. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the china plate against the wall and watch it shatter. The sliding glass door opened. Aunt Celeste walked in, trailing the smell of tobacco and rain. She leaned against the counter next to me. She watched me scrub a roasting pan with a ferocity that was bordering on violent. "You are scrubbing the pattern off, Aurora," Celeste said. Her voice was low, gravelly. "It is stuck," I said through gritted teeth. "The grease is stuck." "It is not the grease," Celeste said. She took a drag of her cigarette. Even though my mother forbade smoking in the house, Celeste didn't care about Marjorie's rules. "You are waiting for them to stop," Celeste said. "You think if you are good enough, or quiet enough, or helpful enough, They will finally say thank you and let you rest. I stopped scrubbing. I didn't look at her. I stared at the dirty water swirling down the drain. They are my family. Aunt Celeste. I am supposed to help. There is a difference between helping and being harvested, she said. She flicked ash into the sink, right onto the clean dishes. Your father is a coward. He loves you, but he loves his comfort more. Confronting Delaney, or your mother, makes him uncomfortable. So he feeds you to them to keep the beast fed. It is easier for him. That is a terrible thing to say, I whispered. It is the truth, Celeste said. You were taught that love is a transaction. You think if you pay the bill, you buy the affection, but you are not buying love. Aurora, you are paying a ransom, and the thing about ransoms is that the kidnappers never stop calling. She put her hand on my shoulder. It was heavy and warm. You are not lacking in love, child. You are lacking in boundaries, and until you build a fence, they will graze in your garden until there is nothing left but dirt. I didn't listen to her then. I was 22 and still believed that if I just worked harder, if I just earned more, I could buy my way out of the role of the servant and into the role of the beloved daughter. So I worked. I climbed the corporate ladder with a desperation that looked like ambition. I became a vice president by 28. I made money, real money, and every time I got a raise, my family got a new need. Delaney's car broke down? Aurora can fix it. Mom needs a new roof? Aurora has savings. Dad's medical copays are high this month? Aurora won't mind. I never said no. I smiled. I wrote the checks. I accepted the fake praise. You are such a good sister, Delaney would say, usually while holding the thing I had just bought her. I don't know what I would do without you. She meant it literal. She did not know what she would do without me because she had never been forced to do anything, but Aunt Celeste's words had planted a seed. It sat dormant in the dark soil of my subconscious for 10 years, watered by every unpaid loan and every dismissed achievement. It grew silently. Twisting through the roots of my family tree, the realization didn't hit me all at once. It wasn't a lightning bolt. It was a slow accumulation of data points. The realization that my bank account was their emergency fund. The realization that my no was treated as a betrayal, while Delaney's I want was treated as a command. I grew up believing I was small. I grew up believing I was the supporting character in the Delaney show. But as I sat there at that Thanksgiving table, watching them panic because the ATM had finally spit out a receipt that said, insufficient funds for your bullshit, I realized something. I wasn't small. I was the foundation. I was the only thing holding them up. And when the foundation moves, the house falls down. Life before the Thanksgiving explosion was defined by a specific, grinding rhythm. It was the rhythm of a high-functioning machine being slowly dismantled for parts. By the time I turned 32, I had established a career that most people would kill for. And yet, within the four walls of my parents' house, I was treated like an unemployed teenager who had lucked into a winning lottery ticket. I worked from my apartment in downtown Raleigh, a space I paid for with the earnings from my job as a senior risk analyst. My typical day involved waking up at 6 a.m. to catch the opening of the European markets, conferencing with clients in Zurich and London, and building predictive models that determined whether a tech startup in Silicon Valley was a unicorn or a corpse. I managed portfolios with values exceeding $50 million, but to my family, I was simply on the computer. My mother, Marjorie, had a way of describing my job to her friends that made it sound like I was running a fraudulent eBay store or playing video games professionally. Aurora is still doing her little internet thing, she would say into the phone while I was visiting, loud enough for me to hear from the next room. No, she does not go to an office. She just sits there in her pajamas. It is not a real job like Delaney's. Delaney, at the time, was working 20 hours a week as a social media coordinator for a boutique clothing store that was definitely a front for a tax write-off. She spent her days taking selfies in changing rooms and captioning them with misattributed inspirational quotes, but because she physically left the house to go to a location. My parents viewed her grind as legitimate and noble. My six-figure income was viewed as magic money, ephemeral, unearned, and therefore, community property. The disconnect was maddening. If I bought myself a new espresso machine, something high-end that cost $800, my mother would look at it with a pained expression, as if I had just slapped her. "Must be nice," she would sigh, wiping down my counter. "Delaney is worried about making her car payment this month. She is driving that old thing with the scratch on the bumper. But sure, you enjoy your coffee." The guilt was immediate and manufactured. It was a reflex. I would feel the coffee turn bitter in my throat. 2 days later, I would loan Delaney $500 for her car note. She would take it with a breezy, "Thanks, sis. I will pay you back on the 1st. The 1st of the month would come and go. If I asked about the money, the narrative flipped instantly. I wasn't a creditor asking for repayment. I was a predator preying on the weak. "You have so much," Delaney would snap, checking her manicure, a fresh set of acrylics that cost at least $80. "Why are you harassing me over $500? Do you know how hard I'm working? You just sit at home and the money rolls in. You don't understand the real world." The real world, according to Delaney, was a place where she was the main character and everyone else was a non-playable character designed to facilitate her aesthetic. Social media was her primary weapon. I learned quickly to never leave my phone or my keys or my apartment unlocked when she visited. She treated my life as a prop house. One afternoon, about 6 months before the Thanksgiving incident, I came across a post on her Instagram. It was a photo of her legs, draped in a cashmere blanket, resting on a coffee table with a glass of expensive red wine and a view of the city skyline in the background. The caption read, "Hard work paying off. Quiet nights in my sanctuary. Boss babe independent." It was my blanket. It was my wine. It was my apartment. She had taken the photo while I was in the bathroom. I scrolled through the comments. "So proud of you." "Babe," wrote one friend. "You deserve this," wrote another, and then a comment from my mother. "Beautiful. Honey. You have such good taste." I stared at the screen. I wanted to type, "Get out of my house," but I didn't. I knew the script. If I called her out, I was petty. If I commented, I was jealous. So I did what I always did. I liked the photo. I validated the lie to keep the peace. Then came Ethan. Ethan was a structural engineer. A man who understood load-bearing walls, but apparently had no concept of emotional structural damage. He was kind, mid-30s, with a nervous laugh and a genuine desire to be part of a close-knit family. He met Delaney at a wedding, and within 3 months, they were engaged. I liked Ethan, I really did. But watching him with Delaney was like watching a golden retriever play in traffic. He had no idea what was coming. Delaney spun a web around him that was a masterpiece of fiction. To Ethan, she wasn't a spoiled daughter who borrowed money to pay off other borrowed money. She was a family-oriented woman who had sacrificed her own career ambitions to help her aging parents. She painted herself as the martyr of the Collins family. And she painted me as the distant, cold career woman who abandoned the nest. "Your sister is intense," Ethan said to me once, cautiously, while we were waiting for Delaney to try on dresses. "Delaney says you are very career-focused, that you don't really have time for family." "Is that what she says?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "Yeah, she admires you. Though," Ethan added, trying to be diplomatic. "She says she wishes she could be that detached, but she just cares too much. You know? She takes on everyone's burdens." I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing. Delaney didn't take on burdens. She created them. The cracks in the facade started to show about 2 months before Thanksgiving. I was at my parents' house for a Sunday dinner. My father, Frank, was sitting in his recliner, looking thinner than usual. His health had been the leverage my family used against me for years. A vague heart condition, high blood pressure, spells of dizziness. Every time I thought about drawing a hard line, my mother would whisper, "Not now, Aurora. Your father is having a bad week. Do you want to be the one to send him to the hospital? So I stayed silent. I absorbed the shocks so he wouldn't have to. I was in the kitchen helping my mother chop vegetables when I overheard Delaney and Ethan in the living room. They were talking in low voices, but the acoustics of the hallway carried everything. I transferred another $2,000 to the house fund, Ethan was saying. That brings us to $30,000 total. We are getting close to a solid down payment. I paused, the knife hovering over a carrot. $30,000? Delaney didn't have $30, let alone $30,000. I know, babe, Delaney's voice purred. I am so proud of us. I put in my share yesterday, too. We are building this together. My stomach dropped. I knew for a fact that Delaney's checking account was currently overdrawn because I had received a frantic text from her 2 days prior asking for $100 to cover a bank error. She wasn't putting money into a house fund. She was spending Ethan's money, or worse, she was letting him save his own money while she pretended to match it, knowing full well she would never produce her half when the time came to close. Or perhaps, and this thought chilled me, she was counting on a third party to fill the gap. I walked into the living room. Delaney looked up, her eyes widening slightly. She knew I had heard something. Hey, I said, looking at Ethan. Talking about house hunting? Yeah, Ethan beamed. We are saving up. Delaney is a wizard with the budget. She has this whole house fund set up. We want to buy something near your parents. A house fund, I repeated, looking at my sister. Delaney's smile was tight, brittle as glass. Just planning for the future. Aurora. You know, normal people things. Not everyone wants to live in a condo downtown forever. Where is this fund kept? I asked. It was a rude question. I didn't care. It is in a savings account, Delaney said quickly. Why? Do you want to audit us? God, you are so obsessed with money. Can't you just be happy for us? I am happy for Ethan, I said. I just hope the accounting is transparent. Babe, tell her she is being crazy, Delaney said, turning to Ethan and grabbing his arm. She made herself small, victimized. Ethan looked uncomfortable. It is fine, really. We have it under control. I looked at my father in the recliner. He was pretending to sleep, his eyes squeezed shut. He heard it too. He knew his youngest daughter was a grifter, but he would rather fake a nap than face the reality. That was the moment the tumblers in my brain finally clicked into place. For years, I thought they just didn't understand me. I thought if I explained my job better, if I showed them my spreadsheets, if I was kinder or more generous, they would respect me. But as I looked at Delaney lying to her future husband, and my father feigning sleep to avoid the truth, and my mother in the kitchen ignoring the obvious fraud occurring in her living room, I realized the truth. They didn't hate me. Hate would imply they had strong feelings about my character. They didn't care enough to hate me. They viewed me as an appliance. I was the toaster. I was the refrigerator. I was useful when I was working, when I provided heat and sustenance. They were happy. When I stopped working, or when I made noise, they were annoyed. You don't love a toaster. You don't respect a refrigerator. You just expect them to function. And when they break, you kick them. I was a utility, and Delaney was the consumer. But utilities have a switch, and utilities can be shut off for non-payment. The danger wasn't just that Delaney was borrowing money. It was the evolution of her entitlement. She had moved past asking for loans. She had moved past asking for help. She was now creating imaginary assets. She was building a future on a foundation of lies. And she fully expected me to be the concrete that filled the hole when the time came. She wasn't just going to ask me for money for a house. She was going to corner me. She was going to wait for a public moment, a moment of high emotion, and she was going to demand ownership. I went back to my apartment that night, but I didn't sleep. I logged into the county clerk's website. I started pulling property records. I started looking at the deed to my parents' house, the house I had paid the down payment on, the house I paid the mortgage on, the house that everyone pretended belonged to Frank and Marjorie. I saw the house fund for what it was. It wasn't a savings account. I was the house fund. And if I didn't act fast, I wasn't just going to lose my money, I was going to lose my name. They were going to absorb me completely, turning my life into the drywall that held up Delaney's masterpiece. I decided then I would not be the drywall. I would be the wrecking ball. 2 weeks later, the invitation for Thanksgiving arrived. It said, "Big announcement." I knew exactly what it was, and I knew exactly what I had to bring. Not a casserole, not a bottle of wine. I needed to bring the receipts. To understand how a house becomes a noose, you have to understand the slow, creeping nature of financial entanglement. It rarely happens with a gun to your head. It happens with a hug. It happens with a tearful conversation in a kitchen that smells like cinnamon and impending crisis. It happens because you are trained to believe that saying no to your parents is a moral failing, rather than a financial boundary. The trap was set exactly 2 years ago. We were not at the house on Maplewood Drive then. We were in the cramped, damp rental my parents had been living in since my father retired. The air conditioning was broken, and it was 90 degrees in the shade. My father, Frank, was sitting at the table with a sheen of sweat on his forehead, clutching a terrifying stack of medical bills. "The doctor says I need to reduce stress," he told me, his voice thin and reedy. "This heat, the stairs, it is killing me. Aurora, I just need a place where I can rest." My mother, Marjorie, jumped in right on cue. She always played the emotional percussion to my father's melody. "We found a place, honey, a ranch-style house, no stairs, a nice yard for your father to sit in. It is perfect. But the bank, well, you know how it is. Since Dad retired, our income on paper looks lower than it is. They just need a cosigner." "A cosigner," I repeated. In the world of risk analysis, a cosigner is just a nice word for the person we will sue when the primary borrower defaults. "Just for the first year," my mother promised, gripping my hand across the sticky plastic tablecloth. "Just until we get the pension sorted out. Then we will refinance and take your name off. We just need a little push to get in the door. You are the only one who can help us." They didn't need a cosigner. They needed a buyer. When I looked at the paperwork, their debt-to-income ratio was catastrophic. No bank in America would lend to them. If this house was going to happen, it wasn't going to be us buying it. It was going to be me. I knew this. I saw the numbers. But I also saw my father wiping sweat from his face with a trembling hand. I saw the desperation in my mother's eyes, and I heard the voice of every guilt trip I had ever been subjected to since I was a child. "You have so much. They have so little." So, I bought the house. I wrote a check for the down payment. It was $50,000. That was my entire savings account, every bonus, every stock option I had exercised, every latte I didn't buy for 5 years, gone in the stroke of a pen. I paid the closing costs. I paid the inspection fees. I paid the first year of homeowner's insurance up front. "We are so grateful," my mother sobbed when I handed her the keys. "You are saving this family. Aurora, this is our forever home." But because I was the one with the credit score of 800 and the steady income, the mortgage broker insisted that I be the primary borrower. And because my parents had credit issues, a polite way of saying they had a history of ignoring bills they didn't like, the title company recommended I remain on the deed for asset protection. My parents agreed too quickly. "Oh, absolutely," my father said. "It is better this way. We don't want to drag your credit down if we miss a utility bill. You keep it in your name, and we will just pay you the mortgage every month. It is safer." It sounded logical. It sounded protective. In reality, it was the first knot in the rope. For the first 3 months, they sent me checks. They were usually late, and sometimes short by $100 or so. But they arrived. But by month 4, the narrative began to shift. "Your father's medication went up," my mother told me over the phone. "We are a little tight this month. Can we skip the mortgage payment? Just this once? We will make it up in the summer." Just this once turned into every other month. Then it became every month. Meanwhile, Delaney moved in. This was never part of the original agreement, The house was supposed to be for my parents, a quiet place for them to age. But 2 weeks after they unpacked the boxes, Delaney broke up with a boyfriend she had been living with and came home to heal. Healing, apparently, involved taking over the master suite, the one with the garden tub that was supposed to be for my father's back pain, and turning the living room into a video production studio for her social media channels. I was living in a 700-square-foot apartment in the city, paying $2,000 a month in rent, plus the mortgage on the Maplewood house, plus the property taxes, plus the maintenance. And yet, when I drove out to the suburbs to visit, I felt like an intruder. Delaney had hung a wooden sign on the front door that said, "The Collins Family Nest." She had painted the kitchen cabinets a trendy sage green without asking me. She bought patio furniture, on a credit card I later had to pay off, and hosted barbecues where I was treated like a guest who had overstayed her welcome. I remember one Saturday afternoon, about a year into this arrangement, I walked into the house and found Delaney filming a TikTok video in the foyer. She was twirling around, holding a vase of hydrangeas. "Welcome to my sanctuary," she said to the camera phone, doing a little spin. "So grateful for this space. Home is where the heart is." She posted it. I saw the caption later. "Bought my parents their dream home. Blessed to be able to provide." I stared at the screen, my blood running cold. She was claiming my purchase. She was claiming my sacrifice. She was wearing my financial stability like a costume. When I confronted her, she laughed it off. "Oh, Aurora, relax. It is just for the algorithm. People like a success story. Besides, it is a family house. What is yours is ours, right?" That phrase, "what is yours is ours." It is the communist manifesto of the toxic family unit. It never works the other way around. What was mine was ours. But what was Delaney's was strictly Delaney's. I stopped arguing. Arguing with Delaney was like wrestling a pig in mud. You both get dirty. But the pig enjoys it. Instead, I retreated to my area of expertise: documentation. I am a risk analyst. My entire professional life is built on the principle that if it is not written down, it did not happen. If there is no paper trail, there is no proof. I started a folder on my encrypted hard drive. I named it the ledger. Every time I transferred money to pay the mortgage because my parents were short, I saved the transaction receipt as a PDF. Every time I paid the water bill because the city was threatening to shut it off, I scanned the notice, every text message from my mother asking for money for groceries, every email from Delaney asking to borrow my credit card for house essentials. I took a screenshot and filed it. I wasn't doing it to sue them. At least, that is what I told myself at the time. I was doing it because I felt like I was going crazy. The gaslighting was so intense, the constant refrain that I was selfish, that I was cold, that I wasn't doing enough, that I needed objective proof that I was actually the one keeping them alive. I needed to look at a spreadsheet and see the number. Total contribution, $112,000. I needed to see that number to know I wasn't the villain. But the turning point, the moment the house stopped being a burden and started being a weapon, happened 2 weeks before Thanksgiving. I had driven over to the house on a Tuesday morning. I usually avoided going there during the week, but I had received a notification that the homeowner's insurance policy was up for renewal, and the paperwork had been mailed to the property address instead of my apartment. I needed to pick it up before the policy lapsed. I let myself in with my key. The house was quiet. My father was at a doctor's appointment, and my mother was driving him. Delaney was presumably at her job or sleeping. I walked into the kitchen. The counter was covered in clutter, flyers, coupons, empty diet soda cans, and there, sitting on top of the pile, was a stack of mail. I thumbed through it, looking for the insurance packet, junk mail, bill, junk mail, and then I saw it. It was an envelope from a lending institution I did not bank with. The logo was a predatory shade of red. It was addressed to the homeowner, but it wasn't sealed. The top edge had been ripped open, jagged and hasty. I pulled the letter out. "Dear homeowner, based on the accumulated equity in your property at 452 Maplewood Drive, You are pre-approved for a cash-out refinance of up to $80,000. It was a standard marketing letter, but there were notes scribbled in the margins in blue ink. My mother's handwriting. Call this number. Ask about interest rate. Do they need Aurora's signature or can we use power of attorney? I felt the floor drop out from under me. Can we use power of attorney? My mother didn't have power of attorney over me. She never had. But the fact that she was asking the question, writing it down in the margin of a solicitation letter, meant they were looking for a way around me. They knew the house had appreciated in value. They knew I had been paying down the principal for 2 years. There was equity in the walls. My equity, my money. And they were trying to figure out how to harvest it. They wanted to strip the house of its value, take the $80,000, and likely spend it on Delaney's wedding, or a new car, or whatever crisis was next on the menu. If they managed to forge a signature, or if they tricked a notary, they could saddle the house with more debt. Debt that was in my name. I stood there in the silent kitchen, clutching the letter. I heard a noise behind me. I spun around. Aunt Celeste was standing in the doorway to the sunroom. I hadn't realized she was there. She was holding a mug of tea, watching me. "You found it," she said. Her voice was flat, devoid of surprise. "Did you know about this?" I asked. Holding up the letter, my hand was shaking. Celeste walked over and took the letter from my hand. She read the scribbled notes. She sighed, a sound that rattled in her chest. "I heard them talking last night," Celeste said. "Delaney wants a big wedding. Your father is worried about credit card debt. They look at this house and they don't see a home. They see a piggy bank." "It is my house," I whispered. "I pay for it. I own it." "To them, you are just the bank teller," Celeste said. "You stand between them and the money. They are trying to figure out how to rob the vault without setting off the alarm." She looked at me, her eyes sharp and clear. "Aurora, look around. Delaney changed the locks on the back door last week. Did she give you a key?" I shook my head. "No. Your mother moved your old winter coats out of the hall closet to make room for Ethan's golf clubs. Did she ask you?" "No. They are erasing you," Celeste said. "They are practicing living without you, while still living on your dime. They want the asset, but they don't want the owner." That sentence hit me harder than any slap. They are practicing living without you. It was true. They were systematically removing my presence from the property while simultaneously trying to extract its financial soul. They didn't want a daughter. They wanted a silent partner. They wanted me to be a ghost that paid the bills. I looked at the letter again. Can we use power of attorney? This wasn't just selfishness. This was conspiracy. This was fraud in the planning stages. "What are you going to do?" Celeste asked. I took the letter back. I folded it carefully and put it in my purse. "I am not going to scream," I said. "I am not going to cry. I am going to do what I do best." "Which is?" "I am going to manage the risk." I said. I left the house without taking the insurance packet. I didn't need it. I went straight to my car and drove to my office. I pulled up the ledger. I opened a new tab. I labeled it Exit Strategy. I didn't call them to confront them about the note. I didn't text Delaney to ask why she was measuring drapes for a house she didn't own. I went silent. For the next 2 weeks, I operated with cold, mechanical efficiency. I contacted a real estate attorney. I drafted the eviction notices, technically, notice to quit, but I didn't file them yet. I contacted a real estate agent, an old friend from college, and had her prepare a listing agreement, dated for the day after Thanksgiving. I realized that if I tried to talk to them, they would gaslight me. They would cry. My father would clutch his chest. My mother would wail about family loyalty. Delaney would call me a monster. They would drag me into the emotional mud until I drowned. The only way to win was to not play their game. I had to move the conflict from the kitchen table to the courtroom. I had to turn their family home back into what it legally was, a terrifyingly expensive asset with a single owner who was done subsidizing their delusion. I prepared the deed of trust copies. I prepared the amortization schedules showing exactly who had paid what. I prepared the spreadsheet of loans that were never repaid. When the text came inviting me to Thanksgiving, big announcement. I knew it was time. I wasn't walking into a dinner. I was walking into a closing. And I was the only one who knew the terms of the deal were about to change. The digital bombardment began 3 days before the holiday. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, vibrating against the wood like a trapped insect. It was the Collins Family Core group chat, a digital space I usually kept muted to preserve my sanity. Mom, everyone needs to be here by 3. No excuses. The turkey is going in early, Delaney. Aurora, don't be late this time. And dress nice. We are taking photos. Dad, big day. Family needs to be together. Delaney, biggest surprise ever. You guys are going to die. The emojis were manic. The tone was aggressive. It was not an invitation. It was a summons. Big surprise. Dress nice. No excuses. In the language of my family, this translated to, we have scripted a scene, and you have a blocking mark on the stage. Show up, say your lines, and open your wallet. I debated not going. I sat in my home office, staring at the cursor blinking on my third monitor, and calculated the cost of absence. If I didn't show up, they would spin the narrative without me. I would become the bitter, estranged daughter who abandoned the family on Thanksgiving. They would cry to the relatives about how hard they tried to include me, and how cold I had become. But if I went, I would be walking into a trap. I knew it. My gut, honed by years of analyzing market volatility and corporate fraud, told me that this wasn't just a dinner, it was a public tribunal. I decided to go for 2 reasons. First, because of my father. Despite his weakness, despite his enabling silence, he was visibly deteriorating. His skin had taken on a gray, papery quality lately, and a part of me, the part that was still a daughter and not just a creditor, wanted to make sure he was actually eating. Second, because you cannot serve an eviction notice to an empty room. If they were planning a show, I needed to be there to drop the curtain. I dressed in a charcoal gray blazer and tailored trousers. It was armor. It was the clothes I wore when I had to tell a CEO that his company was insolvent. I checked my internal pocket. The envelope was there. It was thick. Inside were 3 distinct stacks of paper. The deed of trust proving my ownership. The amortization schedule showing exactly how much equity I had built while they paid nothing. And a letter from a real estate broker confirming the listing of the property. I drove out to the suburbs. The sky was a bruised purple. The sun setting early behind the pine trees. When I turned onto Maplewood Drive, I expected to see my parents' car and maybe Ethan's truck. Instead, the driveway looked like a used car lot. There was the Miller's beige sedan, neighbors who had lived next door for 20 years and who treated gossip like a competitive sport. There was a sleek, white SUV that I recognized as belonging to one of Delaney's influencer friends. There was a station wagon with a Jesus Saves bumper sticker that belonged to Mrs. Higgins, the choir director at my parents' church. And squeezed onto the lawn, ruining the grass I paid to have aerated in the spring, were 2 more cars belonging to distant cousins who usually only showed up for funerals and wills. I parked my car on the street, 2 houses down. I sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. A normal person sees a crowded driveway on Thanksgiving and thinks, how festive. I saw it and thought, witnesses. They had packed the house. They had built an audience. Narcissists never launch a major offensive in private if they can help it. They need a crowd to validate their reality. If they asked me for the house in private and I said no, it was just a dispute. But if they asked me in front of the choir director and the neighbors and the cousins, then my no became a public humiliation. They were banking on my shame. They were betting that I would be too embarrassed to refuse them in front of the people who baked us casseroles when we were kids. I walked up the driveway. The wind was biting. I could smell the wood smoke from the chimney, my chimney, and the heavy, savory scent of roasting meat. I didn't knock. I used my key. The lock clicked. A sound that felt satisfyingly mechanical in a world of emotional fluid dynamics. I stepped into the foyer. The noise hit me instantly, a wall of chatter, laughter, and clinking glass. The house was warmer than usual, heated by the bodies of 25 people crammed into a space designed for a family of 4. She is here, The voice belonged to Mrs. Higgins. She was standing near the coat rack, holding a glass of sweet tea. "Aurora, we were just wondering if you got lost in the big city." "Hello, Mrs. Higgins?" I said, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Traffic was light? I am right on time." I moved through the crowd. It felt like navigating a minefield. Everyone looked at me with a strange mixture of pity and anticipation. They knew something, or at least, they knew something was coming. They had been primed. I could see it in the way the cousins stopped talking when I approached, then whispered as I passed. "There is the big sister," a voice cooed. I turned to see Delaney. She was standing at the base of the stairs, and she looked like she was about to accept an Academy Award. She was wearing a floor-length dress in a shimmering champagne color, completely impractical for a kitchen or a family dinner, but perfect for a camera. Her hair was done in complex waves, and her makeup was professional grade. She was glowing, not with pregnancy, it was too early for that, but with the adrenaline of attention. "Hi, Aurora," she said. She didn't move to hug me. She stood there, posing. "I am so glad you made it. We were worried you would be busy." "I made time," I said. I held out the gift bag I had brought. It contained a very nice, very expensive candle in a scent called Sandalwood and Embers. It was a generic gift. Yes, but it was tasteful. Delaney took the bag with 2 fingers, as if it might be contaminated. She peeked inside. "Oh," she said, "a candle. Cute." She didn't say thank you. She handed the bag to a passing cousin without looking at him. "Put this on the side table. Would you?" "Thanks." Then she turned back to me, her eyes scanning my outfit. "You wore a suit? To Thanksgiving? You know this isn't a board meeting, right? We wanted today to be festive." "I am comfortable," I said. "Where is Ethan?" Delaney's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "He is in the kitchen, helping Daddy with the carving. He is so helpful. Such a dad in training." I walked past her into the kitchen. The room was chaotic. My mother was directing traffic, pointing at dishes and barking orders at the church ladies who were helping carry trays. Ethan was standing by the island, staring at the turkey as if it were a bomb he had to defuse. He looked terrible. His skin was pale, clammy. He was holding the electric carving knife, but he wasn't cutting anything. He was just vibrating. "Ethan," I said. He jumped. He looked at me, his eyes wide and panicked. "Aurora, hey, hi. You okay?" I asked, keeping my voice low. He swallowed hard. Yeah, just big day. Delaney has big plans. Lots of excitement." He looked like a hostage. He looked like a man who had been handed a script 5 minutes ago and told that if he messed up his lines, the floor would open up and swallow him. He knew about the announcement, obviously, but he didn't look happy about it. He looked terrified. "Ethan," I said, stepping closer, "does Delaney have a savings account I don't know about?" He blinked. "What?" "The house," I said. "The bigger house she wants? How is she planning to pay for it?" Ethan opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked over my shoulder at the doorway, checking if Delaney was watching. She said family takes care of family. She said you and Frank talked about it, that it was all sorted." I felt a cold spike of rage. You and Frank talked about it. A lie. A complete fabrication. She had told him that I had already agreed. She had told him that the Bank of Aurora was open for business, so he wouldn't worry about the financial impossibility of her demands. "We didn't talk," I said, before he could respond. My mother bustled over. "Aurora, you are in the way. Go find a seat. We are serving in 5 minutes." She didn't hug me either. She looked at me with a frantic, distracted energy. "And try to smile. Honey, today is a celebration. Don't bring your work clouds in here." I walked into the dining room. The table was a masterpiece of exclusion. It had been extended with 2 folding tables to accommodate the crowd. At the center, in the spot usually reserved for the turkey, was Delaney's place setting. It was marked with a special gold napkin ring. My mother and father were seated directly to her right and left. Ethan was next to Delaney. The VIP section was clearly defined. Then there were the guests, the neighbors, the choir members, the cousins. They filled the middle of the table, and there, at the very end, practically in the hallway, was a folding chair with a paper napkin. It was the kids' seat. It was the exile seat. It was the furthest possible point from the center of power. I walked over to the chair. I didn't complain. I didn't ask to switch. I pulled it out and sat down. From this vantage point, I had a clear view of the entire room. I could see the faces of the guests. I could see the nervous glances they cast toward Delaney. I could see the way my father's hand shook when he reached for his water glass. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I slipped it out under the table. It was a text from Aunt Celeste. She was seated across the room, squeezed between Mrs. Higgins and a cousin. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at her plate. Celeste, eat, observe, don't give them emotion. They are waiting for you to explode so they can call you crazy. Stay cold. I looked up. Celeste caught my eye for a fleeting second and gave a microscopic nod. She was right. This was theater. If I got angry, if I yelled, if I cried, I became the villain. I became the jealous, barren sister who couldn't handle Delaney's joy. They had set the stage for me to lose my temper. I put the phone away. I felt the envelope in my blazer pocket. It was heavy, pressing against my ribs. Copies of the deed. Copies of the unauthorized refinance offer with my mother's handwriting. A copy of the listing agreement. And one more document. A lease termination and notice to vacate for the occupants of 452 Maplewood Drive. I wasn't going to explode. I was going to implode the room. The food started coming out. Platters of stuffing, green bean casserole, mashed potatoes, cranberry sauce. The smell was overwhelming. I took a small spoonful of potatoes and placed it on my plate. Delaney stood up. She didn't wait for everyone to be served. She tapped her fork against her wine glass. Ding, ding, ding. The sound cut through the chatter. The room fell silent. Everyone turned to look at her. The spotlight was invisible. But it was there. "Excuse me, everyone," Delaney said. Her voice was trembling with manufactured emotion. "Before we eat, I just have to share something. My heart is just so full today." She looked down at Ethan and placed a hand on his shoulder. He flinched, just slightly. "Family is everything," Delaney said. "And our family is growing." She looked at me. It wasn't a look of sisterly love. It was a look of conquest. It was the look a general gives the opposing army right before the cannons fire. "But first," she said, deviating from the script I expected, "I want to say thank you to my sister, Aurora." The room turned to look at me at the end of the table. "Aurora has always been supportive," Delaney said, "in her own way, and I know that today she is going to prove just how much she loves us. Right, Aurora?" It was a trap within a trap. She was pre-committing me. She was publicly thanking me for a gift I hadn't given yet, making it socially impossible for me to refuse without looking like a monster who reneged on a promise. My mother clasped her hands. "Amen," she whispered loud enough for the neighbors to hear. I didn't speak. I didn't smile. I just stared at Delaney. I channeled every ounce of professional detachment I possessed. I looked at her the way I looked at a spreadsheet with a rounding error. "Go ahead, sweetie," my father said, his voice weak. "Tell them." Delaney took a deep breath. She smoothed her hands over her stomach. "Ethan and I went to the doctor," she said. "And we aren't just having a baby." She paused. The suspense was so thick you could carve it. "We are having triplets." The room erupted. It was a chaotic release of tension. The church ladies screamed. Mrs. Higgins dropped her fork. My mother burst into tears and buried her face in her napkin. "Triplets!" someone shouted. "A miracle!" Delaney basked in it. She smiled. She waved. She accepted the hugs from the people nearest to her. But I wasn't looking at Delaney. I was looking at the room. I was calculating the square footage of the house versus the occupancy of 3 infants and 3 adults. I was calculating the cost of diapers. I was calculating the sheer, unmitigated audacity of what was coming next. Delaney waited for the noise to die down. She raised her hand for silence. "But," she said, her face turning serious, "obviously, this house, our family home, is going to be a little tight." She laughed, a light, tinkling sound. "So," she turned her body fully toward me, "Aurora is going to fix that, aren't you?" "Aurora?" She didn't wait for an answer. "Sss." "Since you are the rich auntie," Delaney said, her voice dripping with sweetness that barely masked the entitlement, "I think it is time you bought us a place where your nieces or nephews can actually run around. 4 bedrooms, a big yard. We start looking tomorrow." She said it with such confidence, as if the contract was already signed, as if my consent was a formality she didn't even need to wait for. The room went silent again. Everyone looked at me. The pressure was physical. It pressed against my chest. They were waiting for me to nod. They were waiting for me to say, "Of course, anything for family." I reached into my pocket. My fingers closed around the envelope. I didn't stand up. I didn't raise my voice. I just leaned forward, resting my elbows on the flimsy folding table. "Congratulations on the triplets," I said. My voice was calm, steady, and loud enough to reach the other end of the table without shouting. "That is a lot of new life," Delaney beamed. "I know. So, about the house hunting." "I have good news," I said. "I have already handled the housing situation." Delaney's eyes lit up. My mother gasped. "You did?" "I did," I said. "I realized that this house was becoming complicated, so I made a decision." "Oh, tell us," Mrs. Higgins chirped. "Did you buy them that big colonial on the hill?" "No," I said. I stood up then. I pulled the envelope out of my pocket. I walked slowly down the length of the table. The floorboards creaked under my heels. Floorboards I had paid for. I stopped right behind Delaney's chair. I placed the envelope on the table, right next to the turkey carcass. "I didn't buy a house for Delaney," I said, looking at my father, then my mother, and finally resting my gaze on my sister. "I took possession of this one." I looked at Aunt Celeste. "Celeste," I said, "would you do the honors? Please read the first document. I want everyone to hear who actually owns the chair Delaney is sitting in." The sound of metal striking crystal is usually a signal for a toast, a sound associated with weddings and celebrations, but as Delaney tapped her dessert spoon against her wine glass, the high-pitched ding, ding, ding felt more like the bell at the start of a boxing match. "Attention, everyone," Delaney said, her voice pitched to that specific frequency that demands absolute focus. "If I could just have a moment of silence, I have something incredible to share." The reaction was Pavlovian. Around the table, hands dipped into pockets and purses. Within 5 seconds, a dozen smartphones were raised, camera lenses pointing at Delaney like the barrels of a firing squad. They weren't just listening, they were documenting. This was Content, my mother, Marjorie, sat with her hands clasped over her heart, tears already welling in her eyes, angling her face toward the phones to ensure her reaction was captured in the frame. She looked like she was ready for the morning news cycle. Delaney waited for the red recording dots to stabilize. She smoothed her dress over her stomach, a stomach that was currently flat, but was about to become the most expensive piece of real estate in our family's history. "Ethan and I went to the specialist on Tuesday," Delaney announced, letting the suspense hang in the air for a calculated beat. She looked at the camera lenses, not the people. "And we found out that our little blessing isn't coming alone. We aren't having one baby. We are having 3 triplets." The room detonated. It was a physical wave of noise. My mother let out a wail of joy that sounded almost theatrical. Clapping her hands together, Mrs. Higgins screamed, "Praise the Lord!" loud enough to rattle the silverware. The cousins whistled. The neighbors leaned in to slap my father on the back. "3 of them!" my father shouted. his face flushed with a pride he had done nothing to earn. A hat trick. Good man. Ethan. I did not clap. I sat perfectly still, my hands folded in my lap. My eyes were not on my sister, who was currently beaming and blowing kisses to the smartphones. My eyes were on Ethan. He wasn't smiling. In the midst of the eruption, Ethan looked like a man who had just been told his flight was crashing. He was staring at a spot on the tablecloth. His jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle jumping in his cheek. He didn't look like a proud father-to-be. He looked like a man doing mental math and realizing the numbers resulted in a negative sum. He looked terrified. Delaney let the applause wash over her for exactly as long as her ego required, which was a long time. Then, she raised a manicured hand to quiet the room. Thank you, she chirped. We are so overwhelmed. But, she paused, and her face shifted from radiant joy to a practiced, serious concern. She pivoted her body. She was no longer addressing the room. She was addressing me. The cameras followed her movement. I was now in the frame. Obviously, Delaney said, her voice dropping to a serious, practical tone. This changes everything. We are going to be a family of 5, plus Mom and Dad. This house? Well, it is just impossible. We can't raise 3 babies in a guest room. She took a step toward me. The room went silent. The air pressure dropped. So, she continued, I have decided that we need an upgrade, and since you are the one with the resources, you are going to buy me a bigger house. It wasn't a question. It wasn't a request. It was a public sentencing. My mother clapped her hands again, nodding vigorously. That is right. Family helps family. It is the only way. My father grunted his agreement. Logic dictates it. Aurora. Can't have them stacked like cordwood. You have the means. The guests, caught up in the emotional momentum of the miracle, started nodding too. They smiled at me, encouraging me to play my part. They wanted the happy ending. They wanted the generous sister to step up and complete the scene. I could feel their expectation pressing against me like a physical weight. It was a mob, armed with smiles and smartphones, demanding I immolate myself to keep the party going. Delaney reached into the pocket of her dress. She pulled out a heavy set of keys, not house keys, but car keys. She tossed them onto the table in front of me. They landed with a clatter, sliding across the tablecloth and stopping just inches from my water glass. I made a list of neighborhoods, Delaney said, her voice crisp and authoritative. I want you to start looking this week. I need something in Oakwood or North Hills. 4 bedrooms minimum. A fenced yard is non-negotiable. And I want a finished basement for the au pair. I looked at the keys. Then I looked up at her. An au pair? I asked. My voice was calm, contrasting sharply with her manic energy. Don't look at me like that, Delaney snapped, sensing my resistance. She crossed her arms, playing to the camera. I am going to be a mother of 3. I can't do it alone. And since you sit on your computer all day playing with spreadsheets, the least you can do is handle the heavy lifting. I mean, honestly, Aurora, you work on the internet. It is time you did something grown up for once, like providing a home for your family. The insult was precise. She knew exactly where to stick the knife. Work on the internet. Something grown up. She was dismissing my entire career, the career that paid for the roof over her head, as a childish hobby, while framing her biological function as the only valid form of adulthood. A few people chuckled. My mother smiled indulgently. She is right. Aurora, you have so much free time. This is a good project for you. I felt a cold, hard clarity settle in my chest. This was it, the line in the sand. I reached out and touched the keys. The metal was cold. I picked them up, not to keep them, but to move them. I lifted them and placed them gently to the side, off the placemat, as if I were moving a piece of trash that had fallen onto my table. Congratulations again, Delaney, I said. Triplets, that is a significant responsibility. Delaney rolled her eyes. Yeah, save the speech. Just tell me you will have the listings ready by Monday. I want to be moved in by Christmas. I actually have some news about the housing situation, I said. Delaney's face lit up. She turned back to the cameras, beaming. See? I told you guys. She is already on it. My sister is the best. My mother let out a relieved sigh. Oh, thank goodness. I knew you would do the right thing. Aurora. I did do the right thing, I said. I stood up slowly. I buttoned my blazer. I found a house. It is beautiful. 3 bedrooms. Great location. I closed on it 2 days ago. 3 bedrooms? Delaney frowned, her nose crinkling. I said 4, but okay, if the master is big enough, maybe we can make it work. Where is it? Is it the one on Ridge Road? It is not on Ridge Road, I said. And you won't need to worry about the bedroom count. Why? Delaney asked, confused. Because the house isn't for you, I said. The words hung in the air, simple and devastating. It is for me. I am moving into it tomorrow morning. The smile slid off Delaney's face like wet paint. The cameras were still recording, capturing the exact moment her entitlement hit the wall of reality. What? She whispered. I bought a house for myself, I repeated, enunciating clearly for the recording devices. I am leaving. You can't leave, my mother shrieked from her seat. Who is going to pay for the expansion? Who is going to pay the mortgage on this place? That sounds like a question for the homeowners, I said. I reached into my inner pocket and pulled out the envelope. It was thick, cream-colored, and ominous. I placed it on the table. It made a solid, heavy thud that silenced the last few whispers in the room. Aunt Celeste, I said, turning to the woman sitting quietly at the edge of the chaos. You have your glasses on. Would you mind reading the document inside? Just the first page. I think everyone needs clarity on who exactly owns the floor we are standing on. Delaney's eyes widened. She recognized the look on my face. It was the look I wore when I caught her stealing cash from my wallet when we were teenagers. It was the look of consequences. No! Delaney shouted. She lunged forward, her hand snatching out to grab the envelope before Celeste could reach it. You don't get to do this. This is my announcement. Give me that. Her fingers were inches from the paper. I didn't move to stop her. I didn't have to. A hand shot out from the side, fast and firm. It clamped around Delaney's wrist, stopping her midair. It wasn't me. It wasn't my father. It was Ethan. He held her arm, his grip tight enough to turn her knuckles white. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking at me, and for the first time all night. The terror in his eyes was gone, replaced by a desperate, hungry need for the truth. Ethan? Delaney gasped, shocked. Let go of me. What are you doing? Let her read it, Ethan said. His voice was low, shaking slightly, but filled with a sudden, terrifying resolve. I want to hear what is in the envelope. Delaney, I want to know whose house I've been paying for. The sound of the envelope being torn open was the loudest thing in the room. It was a crisp, tearing sound, like a bone snapping in a library. Ethan did not let go of Delaney's arm. He held her there, anchored. While Aunt Celeste slid the documents out onto the tablecloth, Celeste put on her reading glasses. She did not look at the guests. She did not look at the family. She looked only at the text, treating the paper with the reverence of a scripture that was about to exorcise a demon. This is a warranty deed, Celeste announced. Her voice was flat, devoid of the hysterical pitch that had dominated the evening. Recorded in the Wake County Registry of Deeds, parcel identifier number 004921, she paused, letting the legal jargon settle over the gravy and the stuffing. Property address, 452 Maplewood Drive, current sole owner in fee simple, Aurora Collins. The name hung in the air. Aurora Collins. Not Frank and Marjorie Collins, not the Collins Family Trust. Just me, my mother, Marjorie, let out a strangled gasp. She looked around the table at her friends, her eyes wide and frantic, realizing that the narrative she had spun for 2 years, the story of the successful parents and the helpful but subordinate daughter, was unraveling in real time. Why is your name on that? My mother stammered. She pointed a shaking finger at the paper. That is just a technicality. We told you to put it in your name for the bank. It doesn't mean anything. I looked at her. I didn't raise my voice. I kept it at the volume of a business negotiation. It means everything. Mother, do you remember the conversation in the rental kitchen? You said your credit score was too low. You said you didn't want the inquiry to damage your rating further. You asked me to take the title. You asked me to take the mortgage. I did exactly what you asked. But it is our house, my father. Frank shouted. He slammed his hand on the table, but the gesture lacked force. He looked small. We live here. We pay for it. Read the next page. Celeste, I said. Celeste shuffled the papers. Mortgage payment history, she read. Primary account holder, Aurora Collins. Down payment of $50,000. Paid by Aurora Collins via wire transfer on November 15th, 2023. She flipped a page. Monthly mortgage payments of $2,400. Paid via direct debit from the account of Aurora Collins. Total payments made to date, $62,400. Total payments received from occupants, Frank and Marjorie Collins, $8,200. The numbers landed like stones. The guests started to shift in their seats. The math was brutal. I had paid over $100,000 into this property. My parents had paid less than 10% of that, and yet they sat at the head of the table claiming ownership. That is not true, Delaney shrieked. She tried to yank her arm away from Ethan, but he held fast. Mom and Dad pay you cash. They told me. They said they give you cash every month. I looked at Delaney. There is no cash. Delaney. There never was. There were only excuses. The car broke down. Dad's pills are expensive. We will pay you double next month. I have every text message saved. I have every email archived. You are lying, Delaney screamed. She looked at the cameras, which were still recording, desperate to regain control of the scene. She is lying. She is trying to steal our home. She is kicking out a pregnant woman. Who does that? Who kicks out a woman carrying triplets on Thanksgiving? The room murmured. That was the emotional hook, the cruelty of the timing. No one is being evicted from the truth, Delaney, I said calmly, and no one is being kicked out today. But the status of this house has changed. I reached over and tapped the third document in Celeste's pile. Read the listing agreement, please. Celeste picked up the paper. It had the logo of a prominent local real estate brokerage at the top. Exclusive right to sell listing agreement. Celeste read. Property, 452 Maplewood Drive, list date, November 14th, 2025, status, active. My father's face went gray. Active, he whispered. What does that mean? It means the house is for sale. Dad, I said, it has been on the market for 2 weeks. The sign goes up in the yard tomorrow morning. The first open house is Sunday. You sold it? My father looked like he had been punched. Without telling us? How? I check the mail every day. I never saw a letter. I never saw anything from a realtor. I looked at my mother. She had turned a pale, sickly shade of green. She was gripping her napkin so hard her knuckles were white. Mom checks the mail first, I said. Don't you... Mom? My father turned slowly to look at his wife. Marjorie? Did you see letters? Did you see notices? My mother refused to meet his eyes. I threw away some junk mail. I didn't think. I was trying to protect you. Frank, you have high blood pressure. You don't need to worry about business. You hid it, my father said. His voice broke. You knew? You knew she was selling the house? I didn't think she would actually do it. My mother cried out, her voice rising to a hysterical pitch. I thought she was bluffing. I thought if we just announced the babies, she would feel guilty and stop. I did it for the family. You did it for the theater, I corrected. I turned my attention back to Ethan. He was still holding Delaney, but his grip had changed. It wasn't protective anymore. It was restraining. He looked down at the woman he was engaged to, and for the first time, he saw the stranger beneath the fiancé. "Delaney," Ethan said. His voice was quiet, but in the silence of the room, it carried to every corner. "You told me your parents owned this house outright. You told me the house fund we were building was for a down payment on a place nearby, but that we could live here rent-free for as long as we needed because it was family property." Delaney stammered. Her confidence was gone. The script had been burned. I thought they did. I mean, it is their house. Ethan, She just handled the paperwork. It is the same thing." "It is not the same thing," Ethan said. "One is an asset, the other is a liability. And if Aurora owns it, and she is selling it, then we don't have a place to live." "We do," Delaney insisted, grabbing his lapels. "We have the house fund. We have $30,000. We can just go get a hotel until we find something." I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. $30,000? Ethan, is that what you think is in the account? Ethan looked at me. "Yes, I put in $2,000 a month for the last year. Delaney matches it." "Check the account." "Ethan," I said. "Right now, on your phone." "Don't!" Delaney shrieked. She tried to grab his phone from the table, but I was faster. I slid it toward him. "Check it," I said. Ethan picked up the phone. His fingers shook as he opened the banking app. He waited for the Face ID to load. He tapped the savings account. He stared at the screen. He blinked. He tapped it again, as if refreshing the page would change the math. $400, Ethan whispered. The guests gasped. Mrs. Higgins covered her mouth with her hand. "What?" my father asked. "400? There is $412 in here," Ethan said, his voice rising. He turned the screen toward Delaney. "Where is the money? Where is the $30,000? Delaney burst into tears. Real tears this time. Ugly, panicked tears. "I had expenses. The wedding planning. The baby clothes. I was going to put it back. I was waiting for Aurora to buy the new house so I could use the cash for furniture. I did it for us." "You stole from me," Ethan said. He sounded numb. "You stole my down payment." "I borrowed it," Delaney wailed. "We are getting married. What is mine is yours." "And what is yours is nothing," I said. I looked at Celeste. "The final document, please." Celeste unfolded the last paper. It was stapled and thick. "Residential Occupancy Agreement and Relocation Assistance." Celeste read, "This agreement grants Frank and Marjorie Collins, and current guest Delaney Collins, the right to occupy the premises for a period of 30 days from today's date, rent-free." She continued reading the terms. "Upon vacating the premises by December 28, 2025, the owner, Aurora Collins, agrees to provide a one-time relocation stipend of $5,000 to Frank and Marjorie Collins to assist with security deposits on a rental property. Additionally, the owner has prepaid for professional movers to pack and transport personal effects within a 50-mile radius." I watched the guests. I saw the judgment shift. They had expected me to throw my parents into the snow. Instead, I was giving them a month, professional movers, and $5,000 cash. It was more than fair. It was generous. It was the kind of severance package you give to an employee you are firing for cause, but don't want to sue you. "You are selling our home," my mother wept. "You are breaking up the family. Why? Why couldn't you just wait? Why did you have to do this now? Just because you are jealous of your sister?" "It has nothing to do with jealousy," I said. "And it has nothing to do with the triplets." I walked over to the table and picked up the envelope. I reached inside and pulled out one last piece of paper. It wasn't a legal document. It was a crumpled, coffee-stained letter that I had smoothed out and taped back together. "I wasn't going to sell immediately," I said. "I was going to wait until after the holidays. I was going to give you 6 months." I held up the letter. "But then I found this in the kitchen trash can 2 weeks ago." I turned the letter so my father could see it. "It is a pre-approval for a cash-out refinance," I said. "Based on the equity I built. $80,000 in cash." My father squinted. So, it is junk mail. Look at the margin. Dad, I said, look at the handwriting. I pointed to the blue ink scribbled next to the signature line. Read it out loud. My father leaned in. He recognized the handwriting immediately. He had been married to it for 40 years. Can we use power of attorney? He read. His voice shook. Do they check the signature? He looked up at my mother. The horror on his face was absolute. Marjorie, he whispered, you were trying to commit fraud. I said to my mother, you were trying to figure out how to forge my signature or use a power of attorney. You don't have to take $80,000 of debt out in my name. You were going to strip the equity out of this house to pay for Delaney's wedding and her house fund lie. The room was deadly silent. Attempted grand larceny is a mood killer at a holiday party. That is why the sign goes up tomorrow, I said. Because I can't trust you with the walls. I can't trust you with the mail. And I certainly can't trust you with my credit score. I looked at Delaney, who was sobbing into her hands, and at my mother, who was staring at the table as if wishing she could dissolve into the wood. You wanted a bigger house, I said to Delaney. You wanted a solution. I gave you one. I removed the enabling. Now you are free to succeed on your own terms. I turned to the guests. Enjoy the turkey, I said. I believe the movers arrive at 8 in the morning on Monday. I would suggest you start packing. The silence that followed my revelation about the attempted fraud was not the heavy, stunned silence of the previous moments. It was a shifting, uncomfortable silence, the sound of 25 people simultaneously realizing they had bet on the wrong horse. The room, which had been a unified front against me just 10 minutes earlier, began to fracture. Mrs. Higgins, the choir director who had been loudest in her praise of Delaney's miracle, was the first to move. She set her fork down with a quiet clink and pushed her chair back a few inches, creating a physical distance between herself and my mother. The neighbors, the Millers, suddenly found the pattern on the tablecloth fascinating. They were replaying the last hour in their heads, realizing that their laughter at my expense, their encouragement of Delaney's demands, had been recorded on the same cameras that were now capturing the disintegration of the Collins family reputation. They looked at me differently now. I was no longer the stingy sister or the cold career woman. I was the victim of a conspiracy they had unwittingly joined. The shame in the room was palpable, a thick, humid heat that made the air feel thin. My mother, Marjorie, sensed the shift in the tide. She was a woman who lived for public approval, and she could feel it draining away like water from a cracked tub. She abandoned her anger and pivoted instantly to her secondary defense mechanism, martyrdom. Aurora, she wept, her voice trembling with a practiced fragility. She reached out a hand across the table, fingers grasping at air. Please, you have to understand. We were desperate. Your father is so weak. His heart, the stress of the bills. I just wanted to secure the home for him. I didn't want him to worry about moving at his age. You know how he gets confused. She looked at the guests, seeking allies. I did it for Frank. A wife protects her husband. Surely you can understand that. Aurora, look at your father. Do you really want to put him on the street because of a misunderstanding about paperwork? It was a masterful performance. She was weaponizing my father's frailty to paint me as the aggressor. I looked at my father. He was slumped in his chair, staring at the refinance offer with the forged handwriting notes. He didn't look weak. He looked broken. But I could not afford to soften. Softness was what had gotten me into a $100,000 hole. Stop using Dad as a shield, I said. My voice was low, cutting through her sobbing. You are not protecting him. You are hiding behind him, and do not talk to me about understanding. You just sat there and clapped. You smiled and applauded when Delaney demanded I buy her a mansion. You knew I was paying the mortgage on this house. You knew you were trying to steal the equity behind my back, and yet you sat there and cheered while she treated me like a servant. I was caught up in the moment, my mother stammered. You were enjoying the show, I corrected. You liked watching me be diminished. It made you feel powerful. Well, the show is over. Mother, the house lights are on. Delaney, seeing that Mom's tears were not working, decided to go on the offensive. She slammed her hands down on the table, rattling the wine glasses. The tears she had shed moments ago vanished, replaced by a snarl of pure entitlement. "This is illegal!" Delaney shouted. Her face was blotchy, her mascara running, but her eyes were hard. "You can't just sell the house out from under us. We have rights, tenants' rights. I have lived here for 2 years. I will sue you. I will get a lawyer and I will sue you for constructive eviction and emotional distress." She looked around the room, daring anyone to challenge her legal expertise. "I will take everything you have," she screamed at me. "I will make sure you lose your precious job. You think you are so smart? Wait until a judge hears how you threw a pregnant woman into the snow." "Delaney, stop," Aunt Celeste said. Celeste hadn't moved from her seat. She took a sip of her iced tea, her eyes fixed on my sister with a mixture of pity and disgust. "Sue for what?" Celeste asked calmly. "For selling a property she holds the deed to? For terminating a tenancy where you pay 0 rent? For eviction?" Celeste picked up the relocation agreement I had prepared. "She is giving you 30 days, Celeste noted, and $5,000, and movers, in the state of North Carolina. She could have given you 7 days' notice for a tenancy at will. She is being generous. If you sue her, the only thing you will get is a bill for her legal fees." "She is lying about the payments," Delaney insisted, pointing a shaking finger at me. "I paid. Ethan paid." "Ethan paid," I corrected. "You didn't." At the mention of his name, Ethan seemed to wake up from a trance. He had been staring at his phone, at the bank balance that read $412. He stood up slowly. He looked taller than I remembered. Or maybe it was just that Delaney looked smaller. He took 2 steps away from Delaney. It was a small movement, but in the context of their relationship, it was a continent. "The house fund," Ethan said. His voice was flat, hollow. "Delaney, look at me." Delaney turned to him, her face softening instantly into a mask of victimhood. "Baby, please, don't listen to her. She is twisting everything. I use the money for us, for our future." "I sent you $2,000 on the 1st of every month," Ethan said. He wasn't yelling. He was reciting facts. "For 14 months, $28,000, plus the $2,000 I gave you for the deposit, $30,000. You told me it was in a high-yield savings account. You showed me a screenshot of the balance last week." Delaney flinched. I moved it. I moved it to a different account for better interest. I can't access it right now. It is locked. A term deposit." "Show me," Ethan said. He held out his hand. "Open the app for the other account. Right now. If the money is there, I will apologize to you in front of everyone. I will walk out of here with you and we will never speak to Aurora again." The room held its breath. It was the ultimate bluff call. Delaney stared at his hand. She licked her lips. Her eyes darted around the room, looking for an exit, looking for a distraction. I forgot the password," she whispered. "You forgot the password to $30,000? Ethan asked. "I am pregnant," Delaney screamed, throwing her hands up. "My hormones are everywhere. Why are you attacking me? Why is everyone attacking me? Does our baby mean nothing to you? We are having triplets. Ethan, triplets." She was using the pregnancy like a smoke bomb, trying to blind everyone with the emotional magnitude of the news so they would stop looking at the math. But the math was stubborn. My father, Frank, finally spoke. He hadn't looked up from the table since I revealed the fraud letter. He placed his hands flat on the tablecloth. "There is no other account," he said. Delaney froze. "Daddy?" "She spent it," my father said. His voice was raspy, like gravel grinding together. He looked up at his youngest daughter, and the look in his eyes was devastating. It was the look of a man realizing that his love had been poison. I saw the packages, Delaney, the clothes, The trips to Charleston with your friends, the spa days. I asked you where the money came from. You said Aurora gave it to you." He turned to me. "I thought you were spoiling her," he whispered. "I thought you were giving her money and then acting cold to punish her. I blamed you for making her entitled." "I haven't given Delaney cash in 3 years," I said. "I know," my father said. "I know that now. She was spending Ethan's money, and when that ran out, she came for the house." "Daddy, stop," Delaney cried. "You are supposed to be on my side." "I have been on your side for 29 years, my father said heavily. "I never told you no. I never made you work for anything. I let you believe that the world owed you a living, and now you are a thief." "I am not a thief," Delaney shrieked. "I am a victim. Aurora is the thief. She is stealing my happiness. She is jealous." She spun toward me. Her face twisted into a sneer. This was her final weapon, the weapon she used whenever logic failed. The jealousy card. "Admit it," Delaney yelled. "You can't stand it. You can't stand that I'm getting married and you are alone. You can't stand that I am having babies and you are just a barren workaholic. You want to destroy me because you hate that I'm happy." I looked at her. I felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no sting, just a profound, exhausting clarity. "I don't hate that you are happy, Delaney," I said. "I doubt you are happy. Happy people don't need to steal from their fiancés. Happy people don't need to forge their mother's handwriting to refinance a house they don't own." I took a step closer to the table. "And I am not jealous," I continued. "I am simply finished. I am finished being the backdrop for your main character energy. I am finished being the wallet you open when you want to play pretend. I am taking back my life, and step 1 is taking back my house." The guests were silent. The air was electric with the tension of shattered illusions. Then, from the back of the room, a voice spoke up. It was Cousin Mike, a man who usually only spoke to ask for a beer. He was leaning against the wall, his arms crossed. "So," Mike said, his voice cutting through the quiet, "if she lied about the house, and she lied about the money, are the triplets real?" It was the question everyone was thinking, but was too afraid to ask. It hung in the air like toxic gas. Delaney whipped around to face him. "How dare you!" she screamed. The reaction was too big. It was instant, explosive, and defensive. "How dare you question my children? You are sick." "You are all sick. I am just asking," Mike shrugged. "Ethan said you went to the doctor Tuesday. I saw you at the mall on Tuesday. At the food court. You were eating sushi." "I was not," Delaney lied. "I was at the clinic. Ethan, tell them." Ethan didn't speak. He was staring at Delaney, his eyes narrowing. The memory was clicking into place. "You told me to wait in the car," Ethan said slowly. "You said due to COVID protocols. They only allowed the patient in. You went in alone. You came out with the ultrasound picture, but..." The name on the top was cut off. "It was a printout error," Delaney cried. "Ethan, stop it. You are stressing the babies." "Is there a doctor?" "Delaney?" Ethan asked. "Is there a confirmation? Or did you just need a reason to make Aurora buy a 4-bedroom house before the wedding?" Delaney opened her mouth, then closed it. She looked at the guests. She looked at her parents. She saw no sanctuary. She saw only suspicion. "I don't have to listen to this," she screamed. "You are all abusive. I am leaving. I am not staying in this toxic environment one more second." She grabbed her purse. She didn't grab Ethan's hand. She turned and ran. Not out the front door, but up the stairs. To her room. To the sanctuary she had built on my dime. We heard her bedroom door slam. The sound echoed through the house, shaking the chandelier in the dining room. The silence that followed was absolute. Ethan stood there. He looked like a man who had survived a car crash, but hadn't yet checked to see if he still had all his limbs. He looked down at the empty chair where his fiancée had been sitting. He looked at the phone with the $400 balance. Then, he turned to me. He didn't chase her. He didn't run up the stairs to comfort her. He looked at me with a weary, resigned expression. "Aurora," he said. His voice was cracked. "Yes, Ethan," I said. "You said you have records," he said. "Of everything." "I do." "The texts," he said. "The time she said she needed money for the house. The transfers. Can you send them to me?" "I can," I said. "Send them all," Ethan said. "Every single one. I need to know exactly how much this cost me." He pulled out the chair next to him, my mother's chair, and sat down heavily. He put his head in his hands. "I am so sorry," he whispered into his palms. I looked at my parents. My mother was weeping silently, staring at her hands. My father was looking at the ceiling, perhaps praying for a time machine. "I will email the file tonight, Ethan," I said. I picked up the envelope from the table. The eviction notice was still there, unread. I didn't need to read it. The house was already empty of everything that mattered. The illusion was gone. All that was left was the furniture and the truth. And the truth, as it turned out, was the only thing I was willing to own anymore. The morning after Thanksgiving did not feel like a holiday. It felt like the first clear breath after a fever breaks. I did not wake up in the guest room of the house on Maplewood Drive. I had driven back to my apartment the night before, leaving the chaos behind me like a burning building. By 8 o'clock in the morning, I was already moving. I had closed on a townhouse in Durham 3 days prior. It was a brick end unit, quiet, unassuming, and completely secret. I had not told my parents. I had not told Delaney. The only people who knew were Aunt Celeste and 2 of my friends from college, Mark and Sarah, who showed up at my apartment with a rented van and a supply of caffeine. We moved with the efficiency of a black ops team. There was no sentimentality in the packing. I wasn't sifting through yearbooks or crying over old photos. I was extracting my life from the blast zone. By noon, my apartment was empty, and my existence had been transplanted to a zip code where the name Collins carried no baggage. While I was taping boxes, my phone was vibrating itself off the kitchen counter. The digital assault was relentless. My lock screen was a scrolling feed of panic and manipulation. "Mom. Aurora, please pick up. Dad is having chest pains. You are killing him. Mom. We can fix this. Just come over for leftovers. We can talk. Delaney." Voice message. "You represent everything that is wrong with..." Deleted. Delaney. Voice message. "Look, I am sorry I yelled, but you have to understand my hormones are..." Deleted. Dad. "I don't know what happened. Rory, please call." I didn't listen to the voice notes past the first 2 seconds. I didn't read the texts beyond the preview. I treated them like spam emails, noise trying to clutter a clean inbox. I didn't block them. Not yet. I needed the record, but I silenced the notifications. The real work was not physical. It was administrative. I sat on the floor of my new living room, surrounded by cardboard towers, and opened my laptop. It was time to sever the arteries. I started with the utilities. For 2 years, the electricity, water, gas, and internet at the Maplewood house had been in my name. Paid via autopay from my checking account. I logged into Duke Energy. I selected Stop Service. I set the date for December 28th, the exact date their 30-day occupancy agreement expired. I did the same for the water and the gas. I wasn't cutting them off in the dark. I was simply ensuring that on December 29th, the lights would literally go out on their dependency. Next came the streaming services. It was petty, perhaps, but it was necessary symbolism. I saw the profiles on my Netflix account. Aurora, Mom, Dad, Delaney's World. I deleted the profiles. I changed the password. I clicked Sign out of all devices. Somewhere in the suburbs, a TV screen went black, and I hoped it was in the middle of one of Delaney's reality shows. Then, the financial firewall. I called the 3 major credit bureaus. I placed a freeze on my credit report. No new accounts could be opened in my name without a PIN that only I possessed. I called my bank and flagged my accounts for high-risk activity. instructing them to decline any transaction that didn't match my new geolocation. It felt cold. It felt calculated. But as I clicked confirm on the credit freeze, I remembered the letter in the trash can. I remembered the blue ink in the margins. I wasn't being cruel. I was securing the perimeter. Around 2 in the afternoon, Aunt Celeste sent me a contact card via text. Celeste, Robert Henderson, real estate attorney. He is expecting your email. He is expensive, and he is mean. You will like him. I emailed Mr. Henderson immediately. I attached the deed, the mortgage statements, and the notice to quit I had already served. I gave him a simple instruction. You are the only point of contact. If they want to speak to me, they speak to you. It was a relief to outsource the conflict. Mr. Henderson was not my daughter. He was not my sister. He did not care if Marjorie Collins cried. He charged $400 an hour to not care, and it was the best money I had ever spent. Then came the email from Ethan. It arrived at 4 o'clock. The subject line was just, "The truth, Aurora. I am at a hotel. I left the house last night. I need to know. You said you had records. You said you had texts. Please, I feel like I'm losing my mind. She says you are lying. She says you doctored the bank statement. I need to see it. Ethan." I didn't reply with a paragraph. I didn't say, "I told you so." I didn't offer sympathy. Sympathy can be twisted. Data cannot. I opened the ledger. I exported the file. It was a 50-page PDF. It contained screenshots of every text Delaney had sent me asking for money. Need $500 for car repair. Need $200 for groceries. Can I borrow your card for a dress? Promise to pay back. It contained the bank transfer receipts matching those dates. And most damningly, it contained the text from 3 months ago where she told me, "Ethan thinks we are saving for a house, LOL. He is so cute. I will figure it out later." I attached the file. I hit send. That evening, the social media war began. Delaney, realizing she couldn't reach me and that Ethan was AWOL, took to the court of public opinion. I didn't follow her, but Sarah did. Sarah sat on my floor, drinking wine, and read the posts out loud with a dark fascination. She posted a picture of herself crying. Sarah reported. Caption: "Betrayed by the one person who was supposed to protect me. Stress is so bad for the babies. Please pray for our family during this cruel eviction." "How many likes?" I asked, unpacking my spice rack. "A few hundred," Sarah said. "But, oh, this is interesting. Read the comments." She handed me the phone. Below the sob story, the narrative wasn't holding. Mrs. Higgins. Delaney, I am praying for you, but I am confused. Didn't Aurora say she paid for the house for 2 years? Cousin Mike. Is this about the bank account Ethan talked about? Did you find the $30,000? Gary from church. The Bible says the truth shall set you free. We heard some things at dinner that didn't add up. Honey, Delaney was deleting the comments as fast as they appeared, but she couldn't scrub them all. The witnesses from Thanksgiving were not just spectators anymore. They were fact-checkers. They had seen the deed. They had seen the empty bank account. The seed of doubt had been planted, and Delaney's tears were no longer enough to water it. 2 days later, on Monday, my father called. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. "Rory, it is Dad. I have that appointment with the cardiologist today. Your mother. She is not up to driving. She is in bed. She hasn't gotten up since Thursday. I don't know how to use the Uber app. Can you?" I stared at the phone. This was the trap. The helpless old man gambit. If I said no, I was abandoning a sick parent. If I said yes, I was reopening the door. I called him back. "I will drive you," I said. "Be on the curb at 9. I am not coming inside." "Thank you, honey." He sounded relieved, almost pathetic. "I knew you wouldn't. I am picking you up." I cut him off. "I am driving you to Dr. Evans. I am driving you back. We are not talking about the house. We are not talking about Delaney. If you bring it up, I will pull over and you can walk." When I pulled up to the house on Maplewood Drive, The for sale sign was already in the yard. It was big, red, and beautiful. My father was standing on the curb, wearing his heavy coat. He looked older than he had on Thursday. He looked diminished. He got into the car. The smell of the house, Old Spice and stagnation, clung to him. "Hi, Rory," he said softly. "Seatbelt," I said. The drive was silent. He tried a few times to sigh loudly, the kind of sigh that invites a question like, "What's wrong?" I didn't ask. I turned up the radio. I focused on the road. At the clinic, I walked him in. I waited in the lobby while he saw the doctor. I paid the copay with my card because I knew he probably didn't have the cash. When I dropped him back off, he lingered in the passenger seat. "Your mother made a pecan pie," he said, looking at his hands. "She wanted me to tell you. It is in the kitchen, if you wanted to come in for a slice, just to say hello." "No," I said. "Aurora." He looked at me, his eyes watery. "We are your parents. We made a mistake, but you are punishing us like we are criminals." "I am not punishing you," I said. "I am releasing you. You wanted a retirement home? You have 30 days to find one that you can afford. You have the $5,000 relocation check. Use it. We can't afford a place like this," he said, gesturing to the house. "I know," I said. "That is the reality you have been avoiding for 2 years. Now you have to live in it." I unlocked the doors. "Goodbye, Dad." He got out. He looked small against the backdrop of the house that was no longer his. The next day, my mother escalated. I was at my new townhouse, setting up my monitors. When the doorbell rang, I checked the camera feed on my phone. It was Marjorie. She had found me. I hadn't given them the address, which meant she had either followed me or, more likely, she had harassed one of my friends until they cracked. She was standing on my porch, holding a Tupperware container. She looked ragged. Her hair wasn't done. She wasn't wearing makeup. I walked to the door, but I didn't open it. I spoke through the speaker system. "Go away. Mom." She looked up at the camera, startled. "Aurora? Open the door. I brought you some lasagna. Your favorite." "I don't want the lasagna," I said. "How did you find this address?" "Does it matter?" she pleaded. "I am your mother. I just want to see where you are living. It looks small. Aurora, why would you leave your beautiful home for this? We can work this out. Delaney is sorry. I am sorry. Just let me in. We can talk about the refinance. We can put your name on the new loan if you want." She was still bargaining. She still thought this was a negotiation. "There is no negotiation," I said, my voice tinny through the speaker. "Here are the rules. Mom, listen carefully, because I am only saying this once. Aurora, please. Rule 1. No money. I will never write you a check again. Not for a house, not for a car, not for groceries. Rule 2. No house. The sale is final. The closing is scheduled for January. You need to be out by the 28th. Rule 3. No pressure. If you show up here again uninvited, I will have you trespassed. If you call my friends again, I will change my number." "You are being cruel," she wailed, slamming her hand against the doorframe. "We raised you. We gave you life." "You gave me life," I said. "And then you tried to charge me rent for it. Go home. Mom." I turned off the speaker. I watched on the screen as she stood there for another minute, crying, holding the cold lasagna. Then, finally, she turned and walked away. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't guilt. It was the feeling of a heavy pack being dropped after a long hike. My phone rang. It wasn't a family number. It was Mr. Henderson, the lawyer. "Mrs. Collins," his voice was crisp, professional. "I have an update regarding the title search on the Maplewood property." "Is there a problem with the sale?" I asked, my stomach tightening. "Not with the sale," Henderson said. "But my paralegal found something interesting in the county recording backlog. It seems a document was submitted for filing 3 days ago. It was rejected due to a formatting error. which is the only reason it didn't go through. What document? I asked. A mortgage application, Henderson said, from a subprime lender for a cash-out refinance of $85,000 on the property at 452 Maplewood Drive. But I didn't apply for a mortgage, I said. I know, Henderson said, but someone did. The application includes a copy of your driver's license, an old one, likely from a file in the house, and a signature that purports to be yours. I went cold. The letter in the trash wasn't just a brainstorming session. It wasn't just a what if. They had actually done it. My mother had forged my signature, photocopied my old ID, and mailed the application. If the clerk hadn't rejected it for a formatting error, there would be an $85,000 lien on my house right now. Who signed it? I asked, though I knew. The notary seal is blurry, Henderson said, but the witness signature is clear. It is signed by a Delaney Collins. The heir left the room. Delaney. My sister didn't just spend Ethan's money. She had witnessed our mother forging my signature to steal equity from a house I was paying for. It was a conspiracy. It was a felony. Ms. Collins? Henderson asked. How do you want to proceed? This is fraud. We can file a police report. It would certainly expedite the eviction. I looked at the screen where my mother had just been standing, crying about how much she loved me. Do not file the police report yet, I said. Send me the copy of the rejected application. What are you going to do? I am going to hold on to it, I said. I have one more meeting to take, and I think this piece of paper is going to be very useful. The conference room at the law offices of Henderson and Associates did not smell like turkey or sage. It smelled of lemon polish and expensive air conditioning. The table was not covered in a festive cloth. It was a slab of polished mahogany, cold to the touch, and long enough to land a small aircraft on. I sat at the head of the table. To my right sat Mr. Henderson, a man whose smile was as sharp as the crease in his trousers. To my left was Aunt Celeste, acting as my witness and silent moral support. On the other side of the divide sat the defendants, my parents, Frank and Marjorie. Looked like they had aged 10 years in the 5 days since Thanksgiving. My father was slumped in his chair, staring at his hands. My mother was vibrating with a nervous energy, clutching her purse as if she expected someone to snatch it. Delaney sat next to them, wearing a black dress that I assumed was meant to look somber and sympathetic, but just made her look like she was attending a funeral for her own reputation. And at the far end, separated from the family by 2 empty chairs, sat Ethan. He looked tired. He had dark circles under his eyes, and he hadn't shaved. He didn't look at Delaney. He looked at me, waiting. Thank you all for coming. Mr. Henderson began. His voice was smooth, the kind of voice that delivers bad news with the cadence of a weather report. We are here to finalize the transition of the property at 452 Maplewood Drive. However, before we get to the standard vacate agreement, we have a housekeeping matter to address. Mr. Henderson opened a leather folder. He didn't rush. He pulled out a single document, the rejected mortgage application that his paralegal had flagged. He slid it across the mahogany surface. It spun perfectly, coming to a stop directly in front of my mother. Mrs. Collins, Henderson said, this is a loan application submitted to First National subprime lenders 4 days ago. It requests a cash-out refinance of $85,000 on the property owned by my client. It bears my client's name. It bears a signature that purports to be my client's. My mother stared at the paper. She didn't touch it. However, Henderson continued, my client did not sign this. In fact, on the date this was notarized, my client was in a recorded Zoom meeting with her firm in Durham, which makes this signature a forgery. The word hung in the air. Forgery. It is a heavy word. It carries the weight of handcuffs in courtrooms. Marjorie, my father whispered. He looked at the document, then at his wife. You sent it? I thought we were just talking about it. I didn't know you sent it. I had to, my mother burst out. Her voice cracked, high and desperate. Frank, We were going to lose the house. I was trying to save us. I thought if we got the money, we could pay Aurora off, or fix things up so she wouldn't sell. I did it for us." She turned to me, her eyes pleading. "Aurora, you have to understand. It wasn't malicious. It was desperate. I am your mother. I was just trying to keep the family together. I knew you would be angry, but I thought you would get over it once the baby came. I didn't want to lose face in front of the neighbors." "You committed a felony to save face," I said. My voice was calm, contrasting with her hysteria. "You tried to put $85,000 of debt on my name without my consent. That is not motherly love, Mom. That is identity theft." "But I didn't mean to hurt you," she sobbed. "Intent does not matter to the bank," Henderson interjected coldly. "And it does not matter to the district attorney. This is bank fraud. It carries a mandatory prison sentence." My mother went pale. The reality of the situation finally breached her delusion. "Prison." Henderson leaned forward. "Now, usually, the witness to a forged signature is also liable." He pointed a manicured finger at the bottom of the page. "Witnessed by Delaney Collins." Delaney jumped as if she had been tasered. "I didn't know," she shouted. "Mom told me to sign it. She said Aurora knew. She said Aurora gave permission over the phone and just needed us to handle the paperwork because she was busy. I was just doing what Mom said." "You are 29 years old, Ms. Collins," Henderson said. "Ignorance is not a defense when you are witnessing a legal document. You are an accomplice." Delaney looked at Ethan, desperate for a defender. "Ethan, tell them. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't steal." Ethan didn't move. He didn't blink. "You stole $30,000 from our house fund. Delaney, why wouldn't you help steal $85,000 from your sister?" Delaney recoiled as if he had slapped her. "Here is the situation," I said, taking over from Henderson. "I have not filed the police report yet. The application was rejected due to a formatting error, so no money changed hands, but the attempt is still a crime." I placed a new document on the table. It was the final settlement agreement. "I am offering you a choice," I said. "Option A, Mr. Henderson files the police report this afternoon. We hand over the forged application, the witness testimony, and the bank records. Mom and Delaney will likely face charges." My mother whimpered. Delaney looked like she was going to be sick. "Option B," I continued. "You sign this agreement. It states that you will vacate the property by December 28th. As previously discussed, it states that you will make no further contact with me, financial or personal, unless initiated by me. It states that you will not disparage me publicly or privately regarding the sale of the house, and it states that you acknowledge the debt you owe to Ethan." I looked at them. "If you sign, I shred the forgery. If you don't, I call the detective." It was silence again. The kind of silence where you can hear the hum of the hard drives in the server room down the hall. My father reached for the pen. His hand was shaking, but his movement was decisive. "Frank?" my mother whispered. "Sign it, Marjorie," my father said. His voice was unrecognizable. It wasn't the voice of the man who had enabled them for 30 years. It was the voice of a man who had finally looked in the mirror and seen the wreckage. "We are done. We are not sending our daughter to jail. And we are not fighting Aurora anymore. We lost. We deserve to lose." He signed his name. He pushed the paper to my mother. She cried as she signed it, her tears spotting the ink. Then she pushed it to Delaney. Delaney held the pen. She looked at the paper. Then she looked at me with a flash of her old defiance. "This is blackmail," she hissed. "You are forcing me to sign this under duress." "I am forcing you to choose between accountability and a cell," I said. "Sign the paper, Delaney." She signed. She slammed the pen down so hard it rolled off the table. "There," she spat. "Are you happy? You won. You took the house. You humiliated Mom. You turned Ethan against me." "I didn't turn Ethan against you," I said. I looked at Ethan. "Ethan, do you have a question?" Ethan cleared his throat. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small notepad. He looked like a detective who had finally solved the case but wished he hadn't. "The triplets," Ethan said. Delaney froze. "What about them?" "I called Dr. Evans," Ethan said. "The doctor you claimed to see on Tuesday. The one on the ultrasound printout." "You can't do that," Delaney screeched. "That is a HIPAA violation." "I didn't ask for your records," Ethan said calmly. "I asked if Dr. Evans was in the office on Tuesday. The receptionist told me he's on vacation in the Bahamas. He has been gone for 2 weeks." The air in the room seemed to vanish. "There was no appointment," Ethan said. "There was no ultrasound. So I'm going to ask you one time, Delaney, and I want the truth. Are you pregnant with triplets?" Delaney looked around the room. She looked at the lawyer. She looked at Aunt Celeste. She looked at our parents. There was nowhere to hide. The stage lights were too bright. I took a home test," she stammered. "It was positive, and my levels were high. I Googled it. High levels mean multiples. I wanted to be sure before I worried you." "You Googled it," Ethan repeated. "So there is no doctor confirmation. There are no heartbeats. You stood up at Thanksgiving, in front of our families, and announced triplets based on a Google search?" "I felt it," Delaney cried. "A mother knows. I did it to secure the house. We needed the space. If I told you it was just one, Aurora wouldn't have bought the big house. I needed the leverage." "Leverage," my father whispered. "You used a baby. You used 3 babies. As leverage?" "It would have been true eventually," Delaney insisted. "I was manifesting it." My father stood up. He walked over to Delaney. He looked down at her, and for a moment, I thought he might yell, but he didn't. He just looked incredibly sad. "You have turned this family into a tool," he said. "You turned your sister into a bank. You turned your mother into a criminal. And you turned your fiancé into a victim, all because you couldn't stand to hear the word, no." He turned to me. "I am sorry, Aurora. I am so sorry I let it get this far." "I know, Dad," I said. Ethan stood up. He walked over to the table where Delaney was sitting. He took a ring off his finger, a simple silicone band he wore for work, and placed it on the mahogany table. "I am done," Ethan said. "The engagement is off." "Ethan, no!" Delaney grabbed his hand. "Please, it is just a mistake. We can fix it. We can go to counseling." "I want my $30,000 back," Ethan said. He pulled his hand away. "I expect a repayment schedule by Monday. If I don't get it, I will sue you. And unlike your sister, I won't be generous." He looked at me and nodded. It was a nod of respect, of shared trauma. Then he turned and walked out of the conference room. The door clicked shut behind him. Delaney slumped in her chair, sobbing into her arms. My mother reached out to comfort her, but her heart wasn't in it. They were 2 shipwrecked sailors clinging to the same piece of debris. "Mr. Henderson gathered the documents. "I believe we are concluded here. Miss Collins will authorize the movers. You have the checklist for the vacating process. Do not deviate from it." I stood up. I felt light. "One last thing," I said. My parents looked up. "I sent a list of affordable rentals to your email." "Dad," I said, "they are small, 2 bedrooms, within your pension budget. I paid the application fees for 3 of them as a parting gift. Choose one, because on December 28th, the locks on Maplewood Drive will change." "What about me?" Delaney wailed. "Where am I supposed to go?" "You are an adult, Delaney," I said. "You have a job. You have a voice. I suggest you use them to build a life instead of a lie." I turned to Aunt Celeste. "Ready for lunch?" "Starving," Celeste said. She stood up and smoothed her skirt. She looked at my family one last time, shook her head, and followed me to the door. We walked out of the office building and into the bright, cold winter sunlight. The air smelled of exhaust and freedom. I checked my phone. I had blocked their numbers before I even left the conference room. The silence in my pocket was beautiful. I didn't win. You don't win against your own family. You only survive them. I had lost money. I had lost the illusion of a happy childhood. But as I walked toward my car, I realized I had gained something far more valuable. I had my name back. I had my future back. And for the first time in 32 years, I wasn't the supporting beam holding up a rotting structure. I was just Aurora. I unlocked my car door. I got in. I closed the door. Click. It was the quietest sound in the world, and it sounded exactly like freedom. Thank you so much for listening to this story. If you enjoyed this tale of boundaries and retribution, please comment below and let us know where you are tuning in from. I would love to hear your thoughts on how Aurora handled her family. Don't forget to subscribe to the Monica Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and smash that hype button to help this story reach more people who need to hear that it is okay to say no.